fired 32 days before a $380 million deal. That's how my story begins. One cold, humiliating email that didn't even bother to use my name. 16 years of building their entire logistics backbone, and they erased me like I was a typo. I remember staring at the screen, heart pounding, wondering how someone could be discarded that easily, like loyalty was landfill. But what they didn't know was this. Buried deep in the rubble of everything they stole from me, I still had one thing they never accounted for. If you've ever been underestimated or pushed out, stick with me. And before we dive in, subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I still remember the exact moment my entire world collapsed, not with a scream or a confrontation or even a meeting, but with a single email that hit my inbox at 7:14 a.m. I had barely taken a sip of my lukewarm coffee when the notification popped up, bland and harmless like any other corporate memo. But when I opened it, there it was, one sentence, centered in the middle of a nearly empty screen, cold as concrete. Your employment with Harbor Point Dynamics is terminated effective immediately. No greeting, no signature, no explanation. 14 years of my life erased with the same care someone uses to delete an old calendar reminder. It didn't even include my name. Just a sterile directive, as if I were some forgotten line of code in a system they couldn't be bothered to maintain. My first thought wasn't anger. It was disbelief, the kind that makes your mind freeze and your body go numb. I stared at the screen, blinking, waiting for something. Another sentence, a clarification, a mistake notification, anything that would make it feel less cruel. But nothing came. The cursor just blinked at me like it was bored. I felt my throat tighten as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Me, the person who redesigned their routing architecture from the ground up, the one who slept under her desk during peak outages, the one who covered entire weekend shifts because everyone else had plans. The one who stayed when they cut the team in half, then in half again. The one who built Harbor Point's logistics platform so well that investors used my diagrams in their pitch decks. And now I was dismissed with all the ceremony of an automated receipt. I tried to stand, but my legs felt detached from my body. The office around me buzzed with casual morning chatter. People laughing by the coffee machine, someone talking about their kid's recital, a manager complaining about parking, as if my entire professional identity hadn't just been thrown into a shredder. What made it worse was the silence. No one approached my desk. No one looked in my direction. They had known. Someone knew, maybe everyone. And not a single person said a word. When security arrived, pretending to be polite while hovering close enough to guide me like a misbehaving pet, I felt humiliation burn through me like a fever. They asked me to hand over my badge immediately, their tone clipped and rehearsed as if they were reading stage directions. I watched as the guard clipped it to his belt, the same badge I used every day for years, tapping in before sunrise, tapping out long after everyone else had left. Walking out of that building felt like one long, slow-motion funeral for the person I thought I was. I couldn't even pack my desk myself. They told me someone would assemble my personal effects for delivery, as though I might sabotage something if I touched a sticky note. Outside, the air hit my face sharp and cold. The sky was bright, indifferent, painfully normal. I remember standing in the parking lot, staring back at the glass building where I had poured so many years of my life, feeling small and stupid for ever believing loyalty mattered to anyone but me. And yet, beneath the humiliation, beneath the shock, beneath the feeling of being scraped off the company's shoe, something else stirred. Something faint, buried but alive. I didn't know it yet, but this wasn't the end they thought it was. It was the beginning of a reckoning they never saw coming. For the first week after they fired me, I moved through my apartment like someone unplugged the world and forgot to tell me. I spent hours sitting on the edge of my couch with my laptop balanced on my knees, scrolling through job postings that blurred together until they all felt like the same insult dressed in different fonts. Every listing wanted someone hungry, energetic, fast-moving, and ready to hit the ground running. Translation: they wanted someone younger, someone cheaper, someone who didn't have 14 years of corporate battle scars or the audacity to expect a weekend off. And there I was, still wearing the same pajamas from days before, eating whatever was left in my cabinets, crackers, cereal, half-stale cookies, because my stomach twisted every time I thought about spending money. It didn't help that each night I lay awake replaying every moment at Harbor Point, wondering which decision had marked me for disposal. I had always known corporations could be ruthless, but I never thought I'd be tossed aside with so little ceremony. By the second week, the humiliation turned into a kind of foggy hopelessness. I'd open my laptop, stare at the blinking cursor, and feel like it was mocking me. My phone buzzed constantly, but half the notifications were recruiters who had already ghosted me once and suddenly remembered I existed. The other half were bills. I stopped answering both. One afternoon, sometime after 3, when the daylight was starting to turn that tired winter gray, I refreshed a job board for maybe the 100th time. Nothing new, nothing promising, nothing that made me feel like I wasn't standing at the edge of some financial cliff. I snapped the laptop shut, rubbed my eyes, and grabbed my phone just to distract myself. That was when I saw it, a headline tucked off to the side of a news site, almost easy to miss. $380 million acquisition stalls amid core infrastructure concerns. My heart kicked once, hard enough to make my breath catch. Harbor Point Dynamics, of course it was them. I tapped the article, scanning for details, but there was almost nothing. Just a short paragraph quoting the acquiring company saying there were unresolved issues tied to platform ownership. Ownership. The word hit me like a cold wave. I read it again and again until the letters felt strange. I couldn't decide if I was imagining the implication or if my instincts were finally waking up from the haze. Before I could think too hard, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Jonah, one of the only people from my old team I still trusted. "They're in full panic. Something about old infrastructure files? Call me." I stared at the message, pulse pounding, the pieces shifting somewhere just out of reach. Old infrastructure, platform ownership, panic. Something deep in my gut tightened, not fear, not hope, something sharper. I didn't know what I was supposed to find, but for the first time since they erased me, I felt a faint spark of purpose break through the fog. Something was wrong on their side of the fence, and whatever it was, I had a feeling it was about to find its way to me. I didn't call Jonah back immediately. Instead, I found myself standing in front of the closet in my hallway, staring at the stack of old equipment I couldn't bring myself to throw away after leaving Harbor Point. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe I just needed to feel like I still had some piece of my old life within reach. That was when I saw it, the scratched black external drive buried under a pile of outdated routers and tangled cords. I felt a strange jolt in my chest as I picked it up, as if some part of me already knew this thing wasn't just clutter. My fingers hesitated over the USB port before finally plugging it into my laptop. The drive hummed awake, and a small window popped up with a list of folders I hadn't opened in years. My heart started beating faster as I scrolled. I'd saved everything back then. Half-finished drafts, old documentation notes, abandoned prototypes, back when Harbor Point still felt like a place worth staying in. I clicked through the folders, expecting nothing more than nostalgia, or maybe a few outdated system diagrams, but then I found one with a name I didn't recognize. RDS Prototype VI 9. I frowned. I never named anything that cleanly. I opened it. Inside was a detailed architecture document, dozens of annotations in handwriting I immediately recognized, and a set of algorithms I remembered only in fragments. It hit me like a punch. The routing distribution system I developed years earlier, long before Harbor Point even knew they needed it. It had started as a side project, something I tinkered with during long nights when outages kept us chained to our desks. Something meant to fix the bottleneck issues everyone ignored because they weren't flashy enough for investor decks. At some point, someone else had taken over the project officially, but the foundation, the logic, the adaptive model, the distribution flow, it was mine. And the handwriting on those annotations belonged to the one person I trusted back then. Victor Hale, my mentor, my sounding board, the man who used to wear mismatched plaid shirts to executive briefings because, if they want brilliance, they can tolerate pattern confusion. I opened another file and felt my breath catch. It wasn't just my notes, it was a copy of the original filing documentation. Patent draft language. My name listed in the author line, my address in the correspondence field, and a comment at the top in Victor's messy scrawl. File this under you, not them. You'll thank me later. I remembered the day he handed me that folder. I'd brushed it off as one of his eccentricities. Something about the way he looked at me, though, quiet, serious, almost sad, had stuck in my mind without ever making sense. You can't insure a house after the fire, he'd said, and trust me, kid, this place is already smoking. Back then, I'd laughed nervously and reminded him the algorithm wasn't even complete. Doesn't matter, he'd replied. Authorship matters. Claim it now before someone else pretends it was theirs. I'd filed it because he insisted, not because I thought it mattered. And then, like everything else, the paperwork got buried under deadlines and sprint cycles and leadership reshuffles. I never thought about it again, until now. My pulse was pounding as I opened the final document in the folder, a date from 5 years ago, a stamp showing the provisional filing was accepted, and there it was. Hallie Rowan, sole developer, sole inventor. My chest tightened until it almost hurt. The merger delay, the phrase platform ownership, Jonah's message about old infrastructure. It wasn't random, it wasn't technical noise. It was the fault line I had unknowingly built into their empire, and Harbor Point had walked right across it without ever looking down. For the first time since they discarded me, I felt something powerful uncoil inside me. Not rage, not fear, but clarity. They thought they erased me. They didn't realize I had written myself into the foundation. The letter arrived 2 days later, stuffed into my mailbox like it was trying to escape. I almost didn't open it. After weeks of bills, final notices, and pointless recruiter mailers, I developed a habit of tossing anything with a corporate logo straight into the recycling bin. But this envelope was different. Thick, heavy, and stamped with the kind of embossed lettering only expensive problems come wrapped in. Harbor and Klein Corporate Litigation, the return address read. My stomach clenched. Law firms don't send greetings, they send warnings. I stood in the hallway for a long moment before tearing it open. Inside was a meticulously worded letter informing me that Harbor Point Dynamics, my former employer, had identified a discrepancy in the ownership attribution of a critical intellectual property asset tied to the pending $380 million acquisition. They requested an immediate meeting to clarify authorship and transferability. That last word, transferability, made my hands go cold. I read the letter again, then a third time, pacing back and forth while Hazel, my cat, watched with the judgment of a creature who has never filed taxes. They knew, or at least they suspected, and they were terrified. I dropped onto the couch, rubbing my temples, trying to slow my racing thoughts. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. Finally, on the fourth attempt, the caller left a voicemail. A minute later, another call came through, this time from a number I recognized. Eli. Sweet, anxious Eli from my team, the one who always apologized before asking a question. I picked up. Hallie, he blurted, his voice breathless. I don't know if I'm supposed to say anything, but things are bad, like really bad. I swallowed the tightness in my throat. What's going on? There was a meeting, directors, leadership, even Bennett. They're trying to figure out how to, navigate something with the infrastructure. Something about a missing attribution, a missing owner. My pulse quickened. Did they say my name? A long pause. They didn't have to, he whispered. Everyone knows the system falls apart without your algorithm. The new auditors are asking questions no one can answer without you. I closed my eyes. This wasn't just panic. It was the beginning of a corporate tailspin. Eli, I said softly, you need to be careful. Don't get caught in this. I know, he said, sounding defeated. But Hallie, they're scared. Before I could respond, another incoming call flashed across my screen, one I didn't expect to ever see again. Bennett Cross, Harbor Point's CEO, the man who once praised my designs in meetings but couldn't look me in the eye the day security escorted me out. The man who fired me via email. The man who built his career on polished charm and untraceable lies. I stared at his name for a full 10 seconds before answering. "Hallie!" he exclaimed, breathless with false warmth. "Good to hear your voice. I know things ended a bit, abruptly, but I'd love to clear the air." I didn't speak. Let him fill the silence. "Listen," he continued, "we've run into a minor hiccup with some legacy components you were involved with. Nothing serious, just a misunderstanding with the auditors. We'd like to straighten it out and, of course, compensate you for your time." The way he said, "legacy components," made my teeth clench. "Bennett," I said evenly, "what exactly do you want?" He hesitated just for a second, but I heard it, the crack in his composure. "We found a draft," he said carefully, "something that looks like a provisional filing. Obviously, that must have been some internal confusion, so we'd like to assign the patent back to Harbor Point?" I finished. The silence dropped like a stone. Then, "Hallie, let's not be dramatic. This affects thousands of jobs, shareholders, the acquisition. We're all adults." "You fired me 32 days before the deal," I said quietly. "You erased me. This isn't personal." "It is now." When he tried to speak again, I cut him off. "Do not contact me directly. Any future communication goes through legal." "Legal? Hallie, be reasonable." I hung up. My hand shook, not with fear, but with something fierce and electric. They weren't just scared, they were cornered, and they had no idea that the one person they discarded like a broken widget, me, was the only one who could decide whether their empire survived or burned. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, Bennett's voice echoed in my head, smooth, calculated, pretending this was a minor misunderstanding instead of the corporate earthquake it really was. I lay awake staring at the ceiling until the dark turned to gray, then gray to pale winter light. Around 6 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from a number I hadn't seen in years. "Heard the storm landed. Call me. V." My breath caught. "Victor." I dialed immediately. He answered on the first ring. "Took you long enough," he said, his voice rough like he'd been awake all night too. "You got the letter?" "I did," I whispered, "and Bennett called me." Victor snorted. "Of course he did. Nothing motivates a corporate snake like the scent of his own blood." I pressed the heel of my hand to my forehead. "Victor, what exactly did you know back then?" The line crackled for a second, and when he finally spoke, his tone had none of the sarcasm I was used to. "I knew they'd never value you," he said. "I knew they'd drain you dry, take credit for your work, then toss you aside the minute they needed a scapegoat. I saw it coming long before you did." My chest tightened. "So you pushed me to file the algorithm under my name." "I didn't push you," he corrected. "I handed you a parachute before the plane went down. You're the one who filed it." I swallowed hard. "Victor, they're panicking. They want the patent. They want everything handed back to them like I'm supposed to feel guilty for what they did to me." He let out a low exhale. "That's exactly why you're not talking to them anymore. You need someone who knows how to weaponize their desperation." "Who?" I asked, though a part of me already knew the answer. "Marin Ortiz," he said. "Intellectual property litigator. I've worked with her before. She's ruthless in the way you need her to be. She doesn't negotiate with bullies, she guts them." Before I could object, he added, "And she takes contingency cases. She likes fights she can win. Yours is already gift-wrapped." He texted me her number, then said something that lodged itself inside me. "Hallie, this isn't just leverage, this is justice. Don't back down." The line went dead. 20 minutes later, I called Marin. She picked up sounding like she'd been awake for hours, voice sharp, alert, and unimpressed by anything except facts. "This is Marin." "Hi," I said nervously. "My name is Hallie Rowan, and I think my former company is trying to reclaim a patent I filed." A pause, then a slow exhale that sounded almost like a laugh. "Oh," she said, "one of those cases. They sent a letter," I added, "and the CEO called me." "He called you," she repeated, instantly intrigued. "Not his attorney?" "No." "Good," she said. "That means they're scared. Scared people make mistakes. Mistakes make leverage." I felt something loosen in my chest, something that had been clenched since the day I was fired. "What do I do?" "First," she said, "you do absolutely nothing. No calls, no emails, no clarifications. Every word you say right now is ammunition for them. Second, send me every document you have." "And then," there was a smile in her voice when she answered, "then we make them realize they didn't fire a victim. They fired the one person capable of destroying their deal." As soon as I hung up, another message came through, this time from Jonah. "Just a heads up, they're looking for anything they can use against you. They're desperate." I stared at the screen, pulse steady for the first time in weeks. Let them dig. Let them panic. Let them scramble. None of them knew I had just armed myself with something far more dangerous than fear. I had the truth, and now I had someone ready to turn it into fire. The meeting was scheduled for Friday morning in a glass conference room on the 27th floor of a downtown Chicago tower, a place designed to intimidate people like me. They expected I'd walk in shaky, overwhelmed, ready to fold the moment someone in a suit raised their voice. They had no idea I wasn't coming alone. When I arrived, Marin was already there, immaculate in a charcoal blazer and heels so sharp they could be used as weapons. She didn't look at me when I sat down. She didn't need to. Her presence alone felt like a shield I'd never had before. "Remember," she murmured, eyes still on her tablet, "you don't defend yourself today. You watch, I do the cutting." I nodded, swallowing a hard lump in my throat as Harbor Point's delegation entered. Bennett led the pack, flanked by two attorneys I didn't recognize and a compliance director who looked like he'd been awake for 3 days straight. Bennett smiled at me the way predators smile at wounded animals. "Hallie," he said warmly, "glad you could join us. We're all on the same team here, right?" I didn't respond. His smile faltered for a split second before he gestured for everyone to sit. The moment the door closed, one of his lawyers slid a stack of paperwork across the table toward me. "We appreciate your time," he began, voice coated in condescension. "We'd like to resolve a small clerical error involving a provisional filing from several years ago. This assignment agreement simply corrects authorship, so the patent can be returned to its proper owner, Harbor Point Dynamics." He said proper owner like he expected me to be embarrassed for having ever believed otherwise. I didn't touch the papers, neither did Marin. She leaned back casually, crossing one leg over the other. "Before we proceed," she said smoothly, "my client will not be acknowledging any terminology that presumes the conclusion of this dispute." Bennett blinked. "Excuse me?" "Words like clerical error," she continued, "or return, or proper owner. Please avoid them. They imply facts, not an evidence." One of Harbor Point's attorneys stiffened. "We have documentation tying this invention directly to internal project development." "Internal projects built on her foundational work," Marin countered. "Foundational work she filed before Harbor Point even realized it needed it." Bennett frowned, shifting tactics. "Hallie, listen," he said, turning to me with manufactured sincerity. "We know the past month has been difficult. Losing a job after so many years can take a toll on anyone's emotions. But this is a simple situation. You signed an IP agreement like everyone else. You know the company owns anything created during your employment." I met his gaze for the first time. "If you believe that," I said calmly, "then why am I here instead of your legal department contacting the USPTO?" He opened his mouth, but no words emerged. The crack in his confidence widened. Marin saw it too. She pushed a single sheet of paper forward. Not their document, but ours. The sound it made on the table was soft, but the tension it created sliced through the room. "This," she said, "is a notice of exclusive negotiation." Bennett's eyes flicked down. Confusion, then panic. What is this?" "It means," Marin said, savoring each word, That the acquiring company has elected to negotiate directly with my client for licensing rights. They have formally removed Harbor Point from all further IP discussions. The room sucked in a collective breath. Bennett's face lost every shade of confidence it once carried. "You went to them?" he stammered. "We didn't have to," Marin replied. "They came to her." One of Harbor Point's lawyers leaned forward sharply. "This is outrageous." "What's outrageous?" Marin interrupted, "is firing the primary inventor of a critical system 32 days before a major acquisition, while failing to verify who legally owns the underlying infrastructure. Silence. Heavy. Punishing." I watched Bennett's expression shift, first confusion, then realization, then pure, unfiltered dread. A man watching the empire he built on other people's labor crumble in real time. It was the first moment since my termination that I felt the scales tilt, not in my favor, just back to where they always should have been. I stood slowly, collecting my folder with steady hands. "This meeting is over," I said quietly. "Any further communication will go through Marin. And Bennett, I hope you prepared for the board's reaction when they discover the real reason the acquisition fell apart." His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Not defense, not anger, nothing. The kind of silence that only appears when a man realizes the person he underestimated turned out to be the one holding the match over his empire's gasoline-soaked floor. I walked out without looking back. I didn't need to. I knew the exact moment my footsteps reached the hallway, because behind me, I heard it. Chairs shifting, papers shuffling, voices rising in frantic whispers. Panic. The sound of consequences. The sound of a kingdom collapsing under its own arrogance. The sound of justice. 3 days after the meeting, the deal officially died. It wasn't speculation or rumor or whispered panic anymore. It was a headline plastered across every business site in the country. $380 million Harbor Point acquisition falls apart amid patent ownership scandal. My phone lit up constantly as people I hadn't heard from in years tried to check in like we were old friends. I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't need their validation, and I certainly didn't owe them my time. What struck me most wasn't the news itself, but how quiet my apartment suddenly felt. For weeks, my life had been a blur of fear, humiliation, confusion, anger. And now, silence. Not the empty kind, the peaceful kind. The kind that comes after a long storm finally breaks. I was sitting at my small dining table with a real cup of coffee. Fresh beans, not whatever cheap leftovers I'd been rationing, when Marin called. "They've caved," she said without greeting. "Redline revisions came through this morning. They're offering full rights purchase and an advisory contract." I closed my eyes, absorbing the weight of it. What does that mean for me? "It means," she said, voice warm with a satisfaction she rarely showed, "you'll never have to work for people like Harbor Point again. You're in control now." The final contract landed in my inbox an hour later. It didn't just change my career, it rearranged my future. A lump caught in my throat as I scrolled through the terms. Compensation that made my old salary look like a rounding error. Creative control on new system builds. Options, equity, and flexibility. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't trading away pieces of myself to survive. I was choosing what came next. After I signed, I sent a message to Victor, just a screenshot of the executed deal. A minute later, his reply came through. "Told you, welcome to the top of the food chain." That afternoon, as I walked into my new workspace, a quiet office with glass walls, warm wood floors, and a view of the river, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not triumph, not revenge, freedom, true freedom. The kind you don't always recognize until you finally breathe clean air after years of choking on fluorescent-lit expectations. I sat at my new desk, ran my fingers over the smooth surface, and let myself feel the moment fully. I didn't need to hear Bennett's inevitable voicemail to know what was in it. The regret, the excuses, the corporate spin, the subtle attempts to rewrite history into something more flattering for him. I didn't press play. I forwarded it to Victor with a note that simply said, "Thought you'd enjoy this." Then I deleted it. Some things don't deserve to live in your memory. By the time the sun started to set, the news cycle had already begun tearing Harbor Point apart. Angry shareholders demanding explanations, leaked reports about internal mismanagement, analysts predicting Bennett's resignation. He built his kingdom on other people's work, and now it was collapsing under the weight of his own arrogance. As for me, I stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching the city glow as dusk settled in. I didn't feel like I'd burned anything down. I felt like I'd finally stepped out of the ruins they tried to bury me under. They erased me, but I rebuilt myself, not for them, not in spite of them, but entirely, fiercely, undeniably for me. Looking back, what stays with me most isn't the corporate chaos or the dollar signs attached to my work. It's the quiet truth I almost missed. I was stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. Not loud, not flashy, just prepared. I kept the things that mattered. I documented what others ignored. I held on to my work even when the people around me acted like I didn't matter. And in the end, that quiet strength was what saved me. I used to think power belonged to the ones who talked the loudest in meetings or handed out orders from glass offices. But I learned power often sits with the person who has the receipts, the person doing the late-night fixes, the one who remembers the truth long after the leaders have rewritten their own stories. When everything fell apart, my job, my confidence, my sense of direction, I found out something important. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Quiet can mean observant. Quiet can mean patient. Quiet can mean ready. I didn't win because I fought harder. I won because I didn't forget who created the backbone. They were trying to sell. And once I realized that, I stopped begging to be seen and started acting like what I held was worth protecting. If you've ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or pushed to the sidelines, hear me. You might already have more power than you realize. Sometimes the strongest leverage isn't loud. It's simply the truth in your hands. And when the time comes, you'll know how to use it. How to get started today. Save your work. You never know what will matter later. Write things down, even the small things leaders brush aside. Keep evidence of your contributions without apology. Protect what you build before someone else tries to claim it. When you doubt yourself, look at the facts, not their opinions. What quiet strength in your life have you been ignoring without realizing its value?